So Michael Knowles, who makes up for his lack of masculinity by cigars, made an appearance on PragerU. And as always, when great minds collide, they had came up with some profound ideas, this time about why colonization was actually good for the natives. So let's get into it.
There are two kinds of people in the world, the colonizers and the colonized, at least according to the left, which in recent years has labeled all of history's victors the unjust beneficiaries of settler colonialism.
So the opening of the video is setting up a strawman fallacy. Or maybe he has just no access to the internet and has no idea what he is talking about. Settler colonialism is a form of colonialism where the colonizers not only exploit the native population of an area, but also aim to displace them and resettle the area with a new settler population. A label that is not used to describe every victor. Victor here means colonial power, but victor has a better sound to it. And it also lacks a negative connotation. For example, Britain, France, China and Russia engaged or still engages in settler colonialism, while other colonial powers like the Belgians or the Ottomans did not engage in this kind of colonialism, or at least not to a similar degree.
This pejorative phrase has cropped up everywhere the left dominates: the universities, the media, even the government. Its purpose is to delegitimize every Western country that the left doesn't like.
Yeah, the purpose of teaching about chattel slavery is to delegitimize the United States. Same goes for Germany and the Holocaust, the Nanking Massacre in Japan, and Turkey and the Armenian genocide. Some may claim that the purpose of talking about these things is to learn from them, but they are lying.
America, Britain, Spain, Portugal, France, Israel, and so on.
Western countries like Russia and China. Also, why don't they use it for Hungary? It's a Western nation that the lefties don't like.
But the phrase doesn't mean all that much when you consider that every single regime and tribal society in history was established by settlers and colonizers of one kind or another.
Iceland was settled by the Vikings who created a new colony there. So if we go by the Merriam-Webster definition, then they are colonizers. Which was not settler colonialism in the sense that the left uses the term because there was no native population that they had replaced. Settlers and colonizers may sound similar to settler colonialism, but they are different concepts. I am sure he is not trying to deliberately confuse you, this is just a honest mistake. English is a hard language after all, and apparently Michael still struggles with it after studying it for 34 years.
To put it another way, not since Adam in the Garden of Eden has any people sprouted out of the ground. And in the case of Adam, you might recall, he had a little help. Borders, nations, and regimes have changed for all of history as people have multiplied, expanded, and moved around.
Yes, often by conquest and violence, something that many people realize is a bad thing. So what is the reason that it wasn't bad in the case of the United States or Canada or others?
The aim of the decolonization activists is to return land from the people who currently possess it to the people who previously possessed it.
Yes, when applicable, like with India or most of Africa, which is often not the case, like in the example he will give us, because this action would affect people who had nothing to do with colonialism other than being the descendants of colonizers. Other aims of the decolonization activists is to just raise awareness about the issue and try to minimize their effects.
But that doesn't solve the problem. It only pushes the problem one step back in time. In 1980, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the American government had illegally taken the Black Hills of South Dakota, the site of Mount Rushmore, from the Lakota Sioux. The court ordered the government to pay the Lakota the initial offering price of the land, plus interest. But even the liberal court did not order the U.S. to vacate and give the land back to the Indians. How could it? 250,000 Americans live there.
Almost as if decolonization does not mean the mass deportation of innocent descendants of colonizers.
In any case, the Sioux refused the money. And it's a lucky thing, because the payment would raise just as many problems as it would solve. Because the Sioux did not magically sprout out of the Black Hills. In fact, the Sioux possessed the Black Hills for less time than the United States has. The Sioux took the land from the Cheyenne in the late 18th century. If the U.S. is going to pay the immediate previous owners of the land, shouldn't the Sioux pay the Cheyenne? And shouldn't the Cheyenne pay the Kiowa and the Crow who owned the land prior to the Cheyenne? And what about the Comanche and the Arapaho, both of whom claimed the territory before the Kiowa and the Crow, who lost it to the Cheyenne, who lost it to the Lakota, who lost it to the U.S.?
The United States might have done a bad thing, but you see, other people also did that bad thing before, so when the United States did it, it wasn't actually bad because it wasn't.
And how exactly are we supposed to decolonize the Black Hills? Even if we could identify the right tribe, is there even anyone around today who could seriously claim ownership 10 generations later?
A recurring thing in most PragerU videos is that they focus on a very specific instance of a broader category of problems. They explain why the cherry-picked instance doesn't belong in the category or why is it implausible to resolve the specific instance, and then use it to imply that this applies to the entire category of the problem. And even if you can't return the Black Hills to the Native Americans, there are other forms of decolonization that could minimize its impact.
Is there any statute of limitations here?
There isn't. Do you know how I know this? From this video, where he talks about that there was a legal proceeding for this case.
Until about 75 years ago, everyone recognized the right of conquest. If you took land and could hold it long enough, it was yours.
Yes, something that people realized is a bad thing, like killing people for being gay, or killing people for not being Christian, or killing people for being the wrong kind of Christian, or just not wiping your ass. So people decided to fix these issues. Or were these things also good because people did them back then?
Then, liberal utopians convinced themselves that they could outlaw human nature.
The same way they outlawed theft, killing and raping, among many other things that are also part of human nature.
But they couldn't. People continued to grow, explore, and conquer.
That's the problem. That's why people want to raise awareness about these issues. Also, one of these things is not like the others. It's only grouped in here so you can associate it with positive things.
And why do they do it? The decolonization activists will tell you the answer is plunder, material gain. And for most of history, in most of the world, that has been true. The few exceptions, it should be noted, were found in the West. Yes, one motivation of many Western colonizers was wealth. But it was not the only one. They were frequently motivated by higher ideals as well.
And which higher moral ideals led to slavery, mass rapes, genocides, and so on?
The proof is that most of them not only didn't get rich, but were personally impoverished for their efforts.
How is this proof? Do you think that businessmen who went bankrupt were not in the business to make money?
The Pilgrims of the Mayflower gave up lives of relative comfort to settle in America, and half of them died in the attempt. George Washington lost much of his net worth during the Revolutionary War. Thomas Jefferson died a debtor as a consequence of his many years in public service.
Why are we talking about them? For Jefferson, I couldn't even find anything that would indicate that he directly took part in colonization. Is this another straw man pretending that the decolonization activists are against these people?
Even those who proudly referred to themselves as conquistadors, the men leftists call thieves and plunderers,
Because they stole and plundered?
were often motivated by higher ideals.
Higher moral ideals like burning witches, torturing people, and other fun stuff. And the Nazis also claimed to fight for higher moral standards and to fight against degeneracy. So did the Soviets, who claimed to fight against the exploitation of the workers. Were they justified in their actions?
Specifically to spread faith in God and the adoption of biblical morality. 5 years before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, the Aztec Empire, which itself had conquered any number of tribes, sacrificed tens of thousands of victims to their patron demon over the course of just 4 days.
You see, when brown people kill for their god, then they are worshipping a demon. But when white people kill for their god, then they are just doing it because of higher moral standards or something.
Hernan Cortés witnessed these sorts of sacrifices when he arrived in 1521 at the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Aztec priests sliced open the chests of sacrificial victims and offered their still beating hearts as a sacrifice to the demons before kicking their dead bodies down the steps of the temple. Happily, Cortés conquered the Aztecs.
By the way, this is the guy who is advocating for violence. I mean, just by looking at him, a war without physical confrontation would be to his benefit.
Stopped the human sacrifice, and introduced the natives to Christianity.
Well, I can't really argue with that. I am just glad that Christian moral values were introduced to the Americas, preventing further bloodshed.
Those who oppose human sacrifice, and I hope you include yourself in that group, must consider this an unambiguously positive development. This is not to say that Western colonizers didn't commit their share of crimes. They certainly did. It is to say that not all colonization is equal. Some forms are better than others.
Yes, there is good colonization, like settling on the Falkland Islands or on Iceland, and then there is conquering other peoples, trying to erase their culture, enslaving them, raping them, stealing their stuff, committing a genocide, and then pretending that it didn't really happen.
So here's a useful thought experiment. Who would you rather be colonized by? Christians or Aztecs? I'm Michael Knowles, host of The Michael Knowles Show for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Or here is another thought experiment. What if, instead of relying on the false dichotomy fallacy, we can just simply choose to be not colonized? So throughout the video, he frequently misrepresents the position of other people, tries to present colonization in a neutral or positive light by the equivocation fallacy, or just associating it with positive concepts, then later on directly arguing that it was actually a positive thing by relying on unproven premises, arguing that specific cases of decolonization are implausible, and then relying on you to jump to the conclusion that every other case is similarly implausible, arguing that it wasn't a bad thing when the Europeans did it because everyone else also did it and it was accepted back then, and it is part of human nature. These are sound arguments, I am convinced, and I will be making a tax-deductible donation so that Prager University will be able to continue producing more high-quality videos like this one. I explain more propaganda in my last video, and thanks for watching. A special thanks to my Patreons Jay Brandon and Ardabon for supporting my channel.